for more on Mexico's economy. Joining us, Professor Manuel Suarez-Mier. He's an economist in residence at American University. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
This situation with Mexico, I mean, we just went through a couple of very, very big issues, but it's bigger than that. There are some serious reforms that we've discussed here in the past, but
yes,
for whatever reason, there's not much traction. What's going on?
Reforms take time to start working out. First, you make the big reform, constitutional changes. Then comes the legislation that is supposed to figure out how those reforms are going to work. Then the creation of the regulating bodies that are going to administer those reforms. And all of that takes time. And take the case of the energy reform. That was all done very nicely and finished just at the time in which the prices of oil started going down.
And then you have the currency issue, right? I mean, we were talking to Saurohan earlier about the US dollar. It's been very strong, which has had an impact on places like Mexico too.
Well, it has an impact in Mexico, but I think Mexico has managed that much better than other countries. Look at the figures. Mexico's peso has depreciated vis-a-vis the dollar something like 15%. The US euro, the euro has depreciated 40% with respect to the dollar. The Brazil real has collapsed by 50%.
So, I mean, it's not good, but it's much better than everywhere else, it sounds like.
Look at interest rates in Russia. They went from 10% to 17.5%, the central bank reference rate. And in Mexico, they are still around 3%. So yeah, they've been managing that much better.
You and I have talked in the past about some of the corruption problems in Mexico, not just politics, but also in the private sector as well. Are we gaining some traction? Is there improvement in that area?
Well, you need two to tango. You need corrupt government officials and you need corrupt private sector businessmen, because otherwise you don't have that coalition. Yeah. It's not started to improve really seriously. Legislation is being considered.
So the answer is no, but why?
Because the government has not taken more decisive actions, in my opinion.
They're not taking it more seriously.
They are not taking it as seriously as they should. And they, we have created a very baroque system to go after corrupt public officials. But the big fish seem to be elusive to that system.
Well, that's why they're the big fish. Now, here's some good news, right? Despite all these problems, the economy in Mexico is still growing. I mean, we just reported on it. Is that still good news?
Absolutely. And it will be better news thanks to the U.S. economy, particularly manufacturing, picking up, because the correlation between the Mexican performance of its economy and the U.S. manufacturing sector is very, very tight. And the other reason is that a slightly weaker peso helps exports.
We've seen a resurgence in manufacturing in the U.S., and I know we've done some stories in the past on Mexico as well, but how much of a resurgence in manufacturing has there been in Mexico?
It's amazing. I would invite you to do a special report on the new Mexican industry in the most modern sectors, telecommunications, being built, all these gizmos, aerospatial industry, high tech, all of that has come in the last 10, 15 years. And it's been a remarkable resurgence. We have General Electric, for instance, is making large investments in the city of Querétaro on several high-tech plants and hiring engineers and creating an engineering school to train them. So it's a very interesting trend going on there.
Who are Mexico's biggest competitors? Some say, well, I can put a plant in the U.S., I can put a plant in Mexico, but there are a lot of competitors to Mexico, right? There's an entire continent of South America, Brazil, and a number of other countries. We could even argue that China is a potential competitor as well when it comes to manufacturing as well. Who are the big ones they're trying to compete with?
China, hands down. When we signed NAFTA, we figured out this is going to be a boom for us in manufacturing.
The North American Free Trade Agreement.
The North American Free Trade Agreement, Canada, the US, and Mexico. But China came along and stole the basket from us very effectively. We don't compete with the rest of Latin America for the reason that they have chosen a different model. They are protectionist and they produce raw materials with a few exceptions. But for the most part, so if you take the case of Brazil, we don't virtually compete with them anywhere. They try to protect themselves from our sales of cars to Brazil, but otherwise there's very little competition. And they are in a very difficult cycle because the prices of raw materials are going down.
That's big. That's another big story. We're going to get to that another time. Professor, I will send a message on to my boss, RTA. We're going to do more out of Mexico about some of the innovative things that are happening there. Thank you very much. Good to see you.